Magic, a mighty tool of many a powerful wizard, but is often misused by, well, many a mighty tool. It seems to be a common noob mistake to underestimate the power of magic in Warhammer 2. It's a huge game changer that can turn a losing battle into a winning one very quickly. It can very often be squandered and wasted by newer players, but thankfully, with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of patience, even the king of noobs can be an effective sorcerer. So let's begin with a newbie example, of course. Here we are in quick battles. I'm Norska, I'm facing some wood elves. Take a look at this guy's army and tell me what's wrong with it. Anyone? Anyone at all? Yep, you've got it. Well done, guy with the face. He's forgotten to bring a freaking caster. He has no magic at his disposal. Or maybe he just chose not to. But either way, it's incredibly foolish. There's a massive pool of magic resource at his disposal. However, he didn't bring anyone that can use it, so he doesn't have access to it. While I have access to mine, he's created a massive disadvantage for himself. So rule number 1 of the magic school, make sure you at least bring a fucking caster who can use your magic. If you don't bring one, you're missing out on a lot of power. Now, maybe some of you noobs don't understand the magic fully, so let's go through it. The winds of magic in the bottom right corner. You've got power, power reserve, and recharge. The power is how much magic you have available to use on spells. The power reserve affects how quickly your magic recharges. So if you go ahead and use a spell, your power reserve gets used up and your magic recharges more slowly. See, my power reserve went from 60 to 43 and recharge 1 per 6 seconds to now 1 per 9 seconds. So basically, magic recharges slower the more you use it. You can make your recharge rate faster again by increasing your power reserves with items, abilities, characters, such as the double toad combo for the lizard men, which will give you 120 power reserve from the start of the battle. And for one additional thing I should mention on this subject, overcasting, as a lot of people don't seem to know what the hell that is or that you can even do it. If you take a look at your little spell icon, you'll notice that at the bottom of the actual icon where you click, there's 2 little chevrons. If you click the spell once, it lights up 1 chevron and gives you the normal version of the spell. If you click it twice, you get the second chevron light up and you get the overcast upgraded version, which, as you can see in the blue writing, has increased damage and has a 50% miscast chance, which means there's a chance the spell will backfire and hurt the caster. And in the top right, you can see the magic cost is now 24 when it was 17 before, so the spell is just more expensive. So a bit of a high risk, high reward deal. There's a chance you could put out a ton more damage on your enemies, or there's a chance it might blow up in your caster's face. So it's up to you whether you want to take that chance and spend all that magic on it, or simply play it safe. And a lot of spells can be upgraded. The Net of Amentok here, you can see it adds an effect area, which means it can now be cast on multiple units rather than just one. And the same thing with Fast Protection, added effect area, so you can cast it on multiple units. So yeah, that's overcasting. Not all spells can be overcast. You can tell by how many chevrons are at the bottom of the little unit icon. But it's up to you if you want to take the chance on it. I've had a lot of comments of people saying, "Oh, I played 200 hours, but I didn't know you could overcast spells." So I thought it was worth a mention. But all you really need to take from that for now is that magic is powerful. Now, if you don't really believe that magic is that powerful, let's have a quick demonstration. Here's some Graveguard, and I'm going to hit them with the Penumbral Pendulum from the Lore of Shadows. You can see it goes through 2 and a bit units and does a fair bit of damage. Quarter health gone, quarter health gone, quarter health gone. I'm then going to hit a Pit of Shades on this other unit, going to whip off half of their health, and well, there you go. We've done a whole ton of damage just with 2 spells, which took all of 4 clicks of my mouse. It used up a fair bit of magic in my power reserves, but we've translated that magic that we've spent into damage on the enemy. And that is the crucial point here, making sure the magic that you spend goes to good use and isn't wasted. The same goes for abilities like breath attacks here. Does a lot of damage if you land it well and functions basically the same as magic. And there's a lot of different abilities that function like this, just like magic, and they don't use up your pools of magic. But you can see here we've done a lot of damage just with 2 spells and 1 ability. So making sure we use our magic and magic-like abilities wisely is a big step towards not staying in noobdom forever. Now, the mistakes I see noobs making with this powerful magic, at least when they remember to bring it, is that they opt for damage spells like bombardments, explosions, wind spells, and then they either just completely miss with them or put them somewhere where they're not really doing a lot. Which then means that magic that they spent on the spell is basically just been smashed into the ground and has done absolutely nothing. And this is usually the result of people trying to drop these spells and abilities on moving targets. This is usually, more often than not, a terrible idea. To try and hit a moving target with a breath attack is just a bit of a waste of time, just because of how breath attacks work. You may be able to do a little bit of damage on that moving target, or you could do 3 times the amount of damage on a stationary target if you land it well. Very often the best opportunity for these kind of spells is when the enemy is engaged fighting your units. So you need to be patient, wait for the right opportunity to arise. You might get 3 enemy units all clumped up together, which a nice pit of shades placed well can absolutely ruin. You could try your luck on a unit that's just stood still in the open, but there's a risk that the enemy might micro it out the way. Best to try and do this when there's a lot going on for the enemy and a lot for him to micro. So a big waste of magic for newer players is that they simply miss their targets because of the type of spells they're using. If you're looking for a bit of a safer bet to make sure your magic is used wisely, you could try buffs and debuffs. That is, spells that make your unit stronger or the enemy's weaker potentially. These can be useful for turning a losing unit into a winning one. Take greatswords here, they just lost to Black Orcs. But now if they fight them again and we drop the old enfeebling foe spell on them, that reduces the Black Orc melee defense, meaning they'll take more damage, and their melee attack, so they'll do less damage to my greatswords, giving my greatswords a better chance of winning, or at least to do more damage to the Black Orcs. So you don't have to worry about wasting your magic when using buffs and debuffs, because they're pretty much always going to be useful, unless you put them on crappy units. There's no point trying to buff the damage of an Empire Spearman when you could put it on the Greatswords or the Demigryphs, who could do a lot more with that buff. And the same with debuffs, you don't really need to debuff the Goblins. The Arachnarok Spider though could probably use some taking down a peg. So be patient with your magic, wait for those right opportunities. It could mean the difference between doing just half health damage to 1 unit or completely wiping out 3 units. And lastly for this video, I'll give you a few little examples of ways you could set up some casters if you really have no clue. One of the simplest and easiest to use is the Law of Life, which is mostly for good guy factions, and all you need to bring is 2 spells. Earthblood, which will give healing to multiple units in a small area, and Regrowth, which will give healing to a single unit and also increase their vigor. But you can rest assured that you're using your magic wisely if you've only got these 2 spells, because you're simply healing your troops, helping keep them alive. Obviously, again, focus on the more important troops. Don't heal the Empire Spearmen, heal the Demigryphs, for example. And with Earthblood especially, as it can hit multiple units, try and get as many units into that spell so you can heal 3 or 4 units rather than 1. On to the Law of Shadows, one of my personal favourites. 2 or 3 spells can do in this lore book. The Pit of Shades, a very powerful vortex spell, that's one of the ones I dropped earlier. You could replace this with the Pendulum though, instead. Both great damage spells if used wisely. Enfeebling Foe, like I showed earlier, reduces the melee defense and melee attack. Great for taking the edge off elite units or making lords and heroes a bit more vulnerable. And then, simple but effective, the Withering reduces armor and leadership of the enemy, so obviously very good against those heavily armored units to bring them down to size a little bit, and gives them a little bit more chance of routing with that minus leadership. So it can be good to use that one in the later game. So yeah, 3 good spells in the Law of Shadows there. And that's really all you need with any of these casters. 2 or 3 spells is enough. Don't feel like you need a whole book of spells. You simply won't be able to use them, micro them, or have enough magic to use them all. Now to a good old classic pick, the Law of Fire. For this one, we've only got 3 spells, beginning with the Fireball. Great for sniping down lords and heroes or blasting away at flying units, especially if you're a faction that doesn't have a lot of missiles like Chaos or Norska. And then we have a nice AoE damage buff, the Flaming Sword of Ruin. Adds magical, fire, and a bunch of attack damage to all units within the aura. So you can buff 3 or 4 units potentially and have them dealing a ton of damage, especially against units that have physical resistances or are weak to fire. That can be very powerful. And then we have a pretty common pick, the Burning Head. I don't really like it too much myself. It's a little bit too unpredictable, but it's a wind spell. It can do a lot of damage if it goes well, but it is slightly uncontrollable, so it may go through your own troops and backfire. And one for all you evil kids out there, the Law of Death. First spell we've got Doom and Darkness. Quite simply, a reduction of the enemy leadership by a fair amount. Only useful when a unit is low on leadership, of course, potential to rout them off that little bit earlier and chase them off. And then we have Soul Blight, which again, just like the Withering, reduces armor, which is probably the main reason you'd cast it. Also gives weapon damage debuff as well, so that's nice to have, but it's mostly for the armor. And then we have the classic Spirit Leech, a good old direct damage spell, simply rips the health off the enemy, only really to be used though against lords and heroes. It doesn't do very good against units. Now there is another strong spell in this lore book called the Fate of Yuna, but it's a very expensive spell at 22 Winds of Magic, I think. So that's something to consider when choosing your spells. The little blue number in the top right of the card tells you how much it costs. So take that into account when choosing your spells. If you bring 3 expensive spells, you're probably not going to be able to use them all, for example. And lastly, another common lore book to see, the Law of Light. Only 3 spells necessary for this lore book. Firstly, Banishment, a very strong vortex spell, a little bit unpredictable though. It moves wherever the hell it wants, so it could backfire if a lot of your units are around, or you could just drop it right in the middle of the enemy army and hope for the best, but it's very powerful either way. And then we've got the Net of Amantok, another classic, great for pinning units in place, whether they're infantry, cavalry, flying units, and then allowing you to do whatever the hell you want to them. Blast them with missiles, charge them with cav, whatever. And then we've got Fast Protection, which is just a good defensive spell, gives armor and melee defense, so it'll help any unit survive better. So there you go, there's a few wizards and their setups, what you could do with them. There's many different options for many different playstyles, many different game plans, whatever you want to do, there's many different ways to do it. But this is just a few for those who don't really have a clue what to do or where to start. Try some of these out and get used to using just 2 or 3 spells and build from there. Just remember above all else, not to squander and waste your winds of magic. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better idea about what you might be doing wrong with magic. It's a very powerful resource that should not be wasted, at least if you want to win the battle. So rule number 1 of magic, make sure you can use your freaking magic by bringing a caster, whether it's in a lord or a hero, unless of course you're the dwarfs who don't have any magic at all. And the second rule of magic school, simply try not to waste it. Try not to miss with your wind and bombardment spells. Try not to put your buffs on crappy units that aren't going to be able to do anything with it, or trying to hurt enemies that don't really matter. And lastly, rule number 3 for magic school, as engineers would say, keep it simple, stupid. You don't need a ton of spells making things complicated. Just 1, 2, maybe 3 spells, learn how to use them wisely, then you know you're not wasting your resources and it's magic well spent. So there you go. Noob mistake number 3 that you may be making and that may be holding you back from becoming the next ever chosen. For now, try to work on these 3 mistakes if you're making them, correct them and improve yourself. For the next noob mistake, it's going to be one more of the more basic things, and then we're going to move on to some more serious stuff that will make you question your entire existence. Probably. If you are new to multiplayer and are looking for people to practice with, feel free to come to my Discord, link is in the description. We got a lot of new players, a lot of more experienced players that are willing to help the new players out. So if you're looking to learn and get better, check out the link in the description and boogie your way down to the Discord. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I will see you in the future.